stories of our lives, words on a page, create a special feeling that become memories. Favorite melodies sung in harmony, lyrics that will tell your story. Come and join the adventures that we now share.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this episode of the Songs of Our Lives. This is a program where we talk about the role music has played in various senior citizens' lives. This episode we'll be hearing from a retired pastor and my friend, Alex Moir. He will be interviewed by our own Ian Smith. We'll also hear a song requested from Pastor Alex, and that song request will be answered by local guitar vocalist Lynne Serridge from Lynne and the Rebels band Fame. This song will also feature Phil Kane on the guitars, bass, and production. Let's hear from Alex and Ian as they talk about the songs and stories of Alex's life.
How are you, Alex?
I'm doing well, Ian. How about you?
Absolutely wonderful, thank you.
Good.
It's so nice to be sitting here with you today.
Well, thanks. It is great to be together. That's terrific.
And we're here, as you know, this show is called Songs of Our Lives. And having known you for so many years, I know music has played a really important role in your life. And so I was wondering if you could fill our audience in on the role music has played in your life.
Oh, sure. I'd be happy to do that. When I was young, we had the radio on a lot, and I can remember riding into town with my mother and her having that great radio station WJR from Detroit on. And the kind of music they were playing, things like Johnny Mathis and Jack Jones and those great singers, and some of the female singers and jazz singers. I remember one of the jazz singers she really liked was Sarah Vaughan.
What a great singer!
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And in fact, a little while ago, I just purchased a big 3 CD set of all her stuff, including the song I remember hearing in my mom's car, "Broken Hearted Melody," which is a great song. But so that was part of my memory. My mom played piano. She was a pretty good church pianist. She would accompany quartets and duets. And in those days, the church that they were attending went on the radio in Chatham, so sometimes she had to play for those occasions when they were broadcasting a church service. So I got a lot of that from my mom. In elementary school, we had choral music. I went to a rural one-room schoolhouse, so they had a traveling music teacher who went around, and so we had choral music, and of course church was a big deal.
Yeah.
My mom sang in the choir, and so those early Christian songs, the hymns, were really a very important part of my early life.
Well, it sounds like you had a little bit of a variety there.
Yeah, I really did. Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
I too, my mother played a really important role in the music in my life. She too was a pianist, a church piano player, and church music was a huge part of my makeup. I knew 2 types of music when I lived in Winnipeg, church music and the Beatles. And then moved to southwestern Ontario, to Windsor, and was introduced to so much more with CKLW and WJR, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I was going to mention CKLW as well. As I got into my teenage years, I listened to that a lot. And I had a church friend who was a good musician, so the two of us would talk about music and what we'd heard and those days of the Big 8 and all the music that got introduced. So yeah.
What was her name? The DJ? Tremblay.
Yeah, she's about to be honored, I guess, isn't she? They're going to put a statue up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they are.
Rosalie Tremblay.
That's right.
Do you know that her son is the entertainment director at Caesars Windsor?
Really?
Yeah.
Comes by it naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they boosted that signal so they could hear them all the way down I-75.
On CKLW?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was. Well, I had friends in university who were from New York City, and they heard CKLW in New York City. Oh, yeah, at night.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
You know, so you mentioned Sarah Vaughan. Are there any other genres of music that you can identify with, that you like? I remember that you used to, you play guitar, so there must be a whole kaleidoscope of artists that you are familiar with through your guitar playing.
Sure. When I was in my late teens, I had a couple of good friends who were pretty good folk guitarists, folk popular music, that kind of thing, and I kind of, they nurtured me along, and that's when I got my first guitar. So in those early days, it was the late 60s, early 70s, and that was just the Southern California folk rock, country rock, the Byrds, Buffalo Springfield, those groups, and Crosby, Stills and Nash, and of course here we are a couple of days after David Crosby passed away.
So sad.
That was the kind of music that really nurtured me. Plus folk music. Part of the early 60s, as you know, were a lot of folk groups. We just lost Ian Tyson, the Kingston Trio, Pete Seeger. So that sort of influenced me a little bit.
Great lyricists.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
I kind of took folk music for granted growing up. I because I went to university for music, I always went for the most difficult stuff.
Yeah.
And so I glossed over this amazing music that had such a great message.
Yeah, sure.
Like Pete Seeger, he an amazing lyric writer.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And then I might mention too, that was kind of the era when John Denver was coming along. So that kind of music was helpful. Peter, Paul and Mary, those Donovan, Murray McLaughlin, Gordon Lightfoot.
Yeah.
Those guys were all sort of, they kind of bridged a couple of genres there, coming from the folk, but really getting into the more popular music, where they kind of massage their music a little bit to fit that crowd. Yeah.
Music of the 60s, I was born in 62, but because my brother and sister were so much older than me, they were 10 years older.
Sure, okay.
I got to listen to their music. Steppenwolf. My brother was into Steppenwolf.
That's right. Sort of the anthem of the 60s.
I think the album was Cosmos Factory.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah,
I remember that.
I can see the album cover in front of me.
Yeah, that's great.
My era of music was the 70s.
Sure.
Yeah. So you I neglected to mention at the beginning of the interview, I should have said Pastor Alex Moir, because you and I met at Banwell Church when we were both working there. And I think you were actually the one that hired me, and it was a great ride, I got to tell you.
It was. Oh, I enjoyed it. The pleasure was mine.
Oh, well, thank you.
I enjoyed our partnership for, from about 2007 to when I retired in 2018. So
that's right.
11, maybe almost 12 years.
Yeah.
The two of us were together.
And then I hung on there for a couple more years after you, but it just wasn't the same without you.
Well, it helps to, as a pastor, I'm always grateful for the music that's been a part of my life, and what God has given me, what my mom helped me with, and the friends that I was with. And so when you and I connected, I think we understood each other, and the quality that you were able to bring to our music ministry, and hopefully my sensitivity to that, because I realized how important music is to the church, and for us to have a genuine professional musician on our staff was truly a blessing.
Well, thank you for that, and but even more than that, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to do what I did at Banwell. Like, you had such an open mind, and you allowed my wife and I to write cantatas, and to put choirs together and have guest artists come in. And I have to say that it was a very artistic church when you were there.
Oh. Wow.
Very artistic. I think we even had some liturgical dance one Sunday.
Oh yeah, sure, that's right.
That I remember.
Yeah.
And an artist did a piece of art during the service.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
that's
remember.
right.
Yeah,
That's
there's
right. Yeah.
so many wonderful things. I just miss working with you so much.
Mhm.
I remember you do have a great sensitivity for the cadence point of a musical piece, because during communion, you know, I would be trying to mellifluously play, and you know, the people would come back from the back of the church with the empty trays, and I would try to find the cadence point, and I couldn't go, and then you would stand up, and I knew I could take my cue from Alex, and your timing was perfect. I could follow you, and we were right in time, and we came to that point at the end of the song.
Yeah.
I don't know if you realize how much I took my timing from
Good.
your movements and your voice, you know.
Oh, that's good. I'm just glad it wasn't disruptive, because you have to work together, and we were very blessed because the two of us had that sense of timing, and we knew that was a part of the worship experience, and people were blessed by that. So if we were able to be sensitive to that, we knew that that through God, through our Father, through the Lord, through the Spirit, that worship experience would be enhanced by that. So I was happy that I could work with somebody who kind of could sense where things were going. And
Thank you.
And your Sunday by Sunday, or Communion Sunday by Communion Sunday, creativity, because often I think you would come up with a melody for that Sunday. I wish in many ways we could have recorded all of those, because that'd be quite a collection.
And they were all inspired from you, really. I have to say that the music that I improvised during those services, they came from the Lord,
right?
But they were inspired by you.
Yeah.
They're inspired by the moment you opened the service, you know. And so I don't know if you realize the power you have or had then, you know. Amazing.
Yeah,
I want to ask you a question about church and about worship.
Sure.
Because you said the worship experience, and it was very rich at Banwell then, and I remember in the past other churches having a very rich worship ministry, music ministry. And now doesn't seem to be called music ministry now. It's called a worship ministry. And what does that feeling does that give you? You know, what does that make you think of, and with the way church is now and the music of church?
Sure. Well, and let me preface my remarks by saying that there have been a lot of wonderful things that have been brought to the church as far as music and the arts in general over the last 15 or 20 years. And, you know, as I've said many times before, and you've heard this a lot, you know, the Bible, we don't add to that book, it's complete, but the worship book, full of songs and readings, it keeps growing.
Right.
So we've had a lot of wonderful contributions through that. But I think every generation, I think, struggles a little bit to really grab the essence of what Christian worship is all about. You know, I think we end up, it's very Hegelian. Frederick Hegel was a philosopher, and he had this theory, you know, thesis, antithesis, synthesis. So we have a thesis for a while, and then we don't want to do that, so we swing way over the other side. But the valuable thing is when we get to the middle, and it's a synthesis. And the thing I saw mostly in the, probably starting in 1980 and continuing to this day, is that we all remember and are still influenced by the secret church movement, where churches, not just in the United States, because there are some in Australia and some in Canada, but certainly the United States typifies it, these huge churches, and with music that's really very different from what you and I experienced in the 1970s, 1960s. It was starting to come then. The Jesus movement was in the late 60s, that influenced it, but the secret church movement brought powerful musical presentations. And if you went to some of these big churches, you know, they'd have a qualified band with professional musicians and great vocalists, but most of our churches are much smaller, and we can't do all of that. So I think where I've seen the church going, the whole worship service is worship, not just the music. The opening call to worship is worshipful. The prayers are worshipful. The conversations that people have in church are part of worship. Your music was part of worship. My message that I shared, the Bible readings, all of that contributes to worship. And so I think that's one of the struggles we've run into. They talk, let's do worship. Well, the whole thing is worship.
Yeah.
It's not just the opening
I
music
agree with
segment.
It's
all
worship. Yeah.
So, and that came from the Secret Church a little bit. And I think another impact from that was that we tried to be like them, but we don't have enough truly gifted people. We don't have a whole bunch of musicians. Mm-hmm. If all you have is somebody who can play an acoustic piano, that's wonderful. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a guitarist or a bass player, that's okay. Just select the person who can do the music the best, who the Lord has gifted to do it the best, mm-hmm. and do that. Don't feel like you have to copy somebody else. So that, I think, has been an unfortunate development in the contemporary church, which I think we need to be honest enough to address and say, listen, we just have to do where we have to act in the way we've been gifted.
That's a good point.
Not the way that Willow Creek in Chicago or Saddleback in California or Andy Stanley's church has been gifted. There are thousands of people.
That's right.
We are who we are. Yeah. So I think that's, we are not, the development of the church is not evolutionary. The Bible doesn't teach evolutionary development of humankind. People are still sinners. Always have been. Yeah. And churches are not perfect either. So sometimes we let the latest movement or the latest thing influence us, and we lack balance. So that's why music ministers are so important. Why we were so blessed to have you in our church, because you had genuine musical training, and that's why it's important to have a resident theologian, which is what the pastor is, mm-hmm. To be able to reflect with people and say, okay, what does the Scripture say to us about our worship and our music, and what importance does it bring to us? So yeah, I think we have a challenge today. We do.
Yeah. It seems that there's a movement now, or it's common that the only music in church now is the worship time.
Absolutely.
with congregational singing. And I learned how important congregational singing is when I was at Banwell under your tutelage, and but we had more than that, mm-hmm. because some people will get, if a cellist came in, there's a warm sound that a cello mm-hmm. brings. It may take somebody into a nice, beautiful, peaceful moment, a memory, but where God can really talk to them,
Yeah.
And that's a lot. I don't see that happening as much, at least at our church, but I find that common at other churches as well.
I think you're quite right. Yeah. This is a quote that I picked up a number of years ago from Arthur Rubinstein, a great pianist, and he was talking about the ability of the contemporary musicians of his day to play very well. He says, but the problem is you've learned how to play. You've learned how to play properly. Now, when are you going to learn how to play music? Yeah. And so, to be a musical person, you can have a lot of training and ability, and be precise and knowledgeable, but you've got to be a musical person as well. And I think you certainly brought that to the table, particularly when we had choirs and all kinds of different singers with all kinds of different ability, and you were able to blend them in. So you had that musical ability. And I think that's what we have to really be sensitive to today in the church, particularly since we know that music is ministry. Mm-hmm. So it's part of the Spirit. Mm-hmm. So it's being musical, but it's also being in tune with the Spirit of the living God.
Amen.
And so that ability, I remember, and I won't name names, but there was a fellow who wanted to sing. And he was... I don't know whether he'd even be an average singer, but he wanted to give. He wanted to share his gift, and you nurtured him in such a way that was a helpful and meaningful worship experience for our whole congregation and for him too.
I know that I remember the exact situation you're talking about. He couldn't carry a tune in a bucket, and he admits it. And he said to the congregation, you may not want to hear my voice, but God does.
Yeah.
And that set the stage.
Yeah, sure.
And boy, in his out of tune ways and his half speech
Yep.
and have.
Yep.
I had a tear in my eye.
Yeah, sure. Oh,
Yeah.
sure you did. Yeah,
Isn't that
that's right.
something?
It is, yeah. So I think Rubinstein's quote was, "You've learned to play the notes. When will you learn how to play the music?" That's pretty much the exact term. So we, as the Christian church, we ought to be able to do that because we've got the Holy Spirit to guide and direct us, and into a new understanding of what music really is. It's not performance, even though we're happy when it's performed well. We're delighted, and I know you made every effort with all the music that was a part of your ministry at our church. But it's not about the notes.
Exactly.
It's about the music.
Now, speaking of professional music, have you seen any good concerts lately?
Well, Linda and I were just in Nashville a few weeks ago to see Amy Grant and Vince Gill at the Ryman Auditorium. They have an annual Christmas show. They have 12 shows over a couple of weeks or 3 weeks. And,
That's amazing.
So we were there at the Ryman, and that was quite an event.
Oh, I bet.
A big band, 6 singers. Gee whiz, it was terrific. So yeah, that's our most recent concert experience.
Now, have you had any other concert experiences that you that really stand out for you?
Well, I remember my interest has been in the folk rock type of genre. Although I've been to classical performances, I've learned to enjoy jazz over the last 15 or 20 years, or well, longer than that. But my genre is basically folk rock. So I remember a concert I saw in Indianapolis years ago with Linda Ronstadt, and I had some of her recordings, but I was not prepared for the power that she possessed as a vocalist. She just came out and opened her mouth, and wow, we were just really impressed. But probably the first concert I ever saw, first professional concert, was over here in Pine Knob in Detroit, where Stephen Stills, who played with David Crosby, with Crosby, Stills, and Nash, but he had a new band he was creating called Manassas, named after a Civil War battle in Virginia, and had a number of musicians that I knew from other bands, and it was at Pine Knob, and they were a wonderful band, a terrific band, good rhythm, good bass player, keyboard guys, guitar. I mean, they were just spectacular. I'd never seen anything like that. I'd always just listened to the records and never been to a live event. But through the years, I've had friends who've pushed me a little bit, and I had a friend who said, "Let's go over to that. Let's take a bunch of us and go over to that." Now, crossing the border was an adventure because that was the early 70s when border officials were very suspicious of those of us with long hair, and so we had a little bit of a delay going over there. I won't tell you exactly what happened, but we were just going to a concert, for goodness sakes. But anyway, that was my first experience with a professional concert, seeing that kind of a thing, and it was really eye-opening.
Yeah, well, I bet. Yeah, I remember Pine Knob was a great venue.
It was. Yeah.
Is that DTE now?
It is, but I think the Pine Knob name has been resurrected. Now I don't know whether it's for the ski hill but I've seen it actually in print too.
Oh, okay.
So it used to be DTE for a long time, but I think they're starting to sneak back into that Pine Knob thing, because that's what you and I remember.
Absolutely, and I think everybody kind of remembers Pine Knob.
Oh yeah, that was a great venue. It really, really was.
Yeah, my first concert that I saw was not there. My first concert I saw, other than going to see like Roger Williams or like my parents would take me to the symphony.
Oh really? Oh good.
Yeah, and I was choral concerts growing up.
Yeah,
and
sure.
But it was Styx, the
really?
group Styx in 1970. I was at a bandathon, and I snuck out of the bandathon, went to see Styx, and came back to the bandathon, and the teacher didn't know I had left. Bandathon was like a 24-hour band. So
was it at Cobo or something?
Yeah, I think it was at Cobo.
Was it? Yeah.
It was.
So Styx, that was the big song "Lady"?
Yeah, they'd had Lady and
Some
I think,
others too.
oh goodness, I can't. Lady, Dennis DeYoung was the singer. Really,
was
did you
terrific.
notice the singers in the '70s had those high,
Oh.
beautiful voices?
Oh, absolutely. One of my favorites was Orleans.
Oh yeah,
Dance with Me and You're Still the One, and that guy could get up there,
great band.
full voice,
Yeah,
and yeah, the band was terrific.
yeah.
The band was
I
terrific.
forget the guy's name, but a tremendous singer.
Oh yeah, oh
yeah,
man.
and that was not falsetto, was it?
No, it was full voice. I think. Yeah, he was something else. Yeah, yeah. There were. You're right. The '70s, that was characterized, I think, by some of those really good lead singers.
Yeah. So Alex, we've talked about a few songs, some eras, some singers. I really have enjoyed our talk about music in the church as well. I want to ask you if you could hear any song, if we were to play a song for you, what would that song be?
Well, you and I both know how difficult that is.
I know.
Because of all the songs we've listened to and played through the years, and but I'm glad I'm glad you told me that you were going to ask this question in advance. So I've had a little bit of time to sift it around in my mind. But the song I've chosen, it goes back to my folk rock roots. And one of my favorite groups was the Byrds. Some people have said they're sort of our Beatles, North America's Beatles. But one of those songs that they did was I think a song that has become kind of an anthem. And favorite songs, you never tire of them really. They always kind of make the hair on the back of your neck stand
That's
up when
right.
you hear them.
Mm-hmm.
And so the song for me would be Turn, Turn, Turn. And that's a Pete Seeger song. He wrote it, but actually it's based on Ecclesiastes chapter 3. To everything there is a season and a purpose under
That's
heaven.
awesome. I just got goosebumps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a great song. And the reason I like it is because I think it really typifies that 60s guitar sound. Roger McGuinn, who was the lead guitarist for them, had a Rickenbacker 12-string, and he was very good. And it's a jangly type of song, and it's been mimicked by people like Tom Petty and other groups that came along later. But so it typifies the '60s and that sort of folk rock stuff that I love, but it also has a Christian message, a spiritual message that the whole idea that we used to call providence, that God provides in every season, and so by implication it talks about faith. To every season, there are things that happen,
Mm-hmm.
and the best thing for us is not to try to fight against it, but to accept it, to allow God to mold us and blend us, to trust in Him, that no matter the circumstances, no matter what happens, we're going to get through this. And so that, I think, that may be my favorite song. I have dozens like you do, dozens of others that I just love. But when I thought about it, I thought, I think Turn, Turn, Turn is probably my favorite song.
Well, that's a great choice. That is a great choice, and you know what? I think we can make that happen for you for sure. Absolutely, yeah.
Well, it's pretty famous, and it's from that era, and the Byrds made quite a splash with the way they approached music. But anyway, thanks. I appreciate that.
Well, Alex, I just want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. It's been very enlightening and very enjoyable.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Ian, to be included.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Alex and Ian, for a wonderful interview and some great stories and information from the life of Pastor Alex. Alex has requested the song Turn, 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 written by the folk writer Pete Seeger and based on Ecclesiastes 3 from the Bible. We have as our guest musical artist, local singer, Lynne Serridge, who has blazed a trail since the 1970s on her own and with the band Lynne and the Rebels. Let's hear her rendition of Turn, Turn, Turn.
To everything, turn, turn, turn.
Alex. My name is Lynne, and I just did your favorite song, Turn, Turn, Turn. I hope you like it.
Thank you, Lynne, and Phil for your good version of Turn, Turn, Turn. And thank you, Alex, for your insightful stories and interview. My name is Wendell Phipps, and I want to thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Songs of Our Lives.